All right, so today we're going to talk about defensive and distracted driving. So on the agenda, we're going to look at some North Carolina statistics, some U.S. statistics, just briefly touch on defensive driving. We're going to talk a lot about distracted driving, cell phone use while driving, and then we'll cover a couple of tips on how to prevent distracted driving. All right, so North Carolina traffic data. In 2018, reportable traffic crashes increased by 2.4%. The fatalities increased by 3.3%. Motorcycle deaths increased by 20.9%, so that's a pretty big jump. Pedestrians killed in motor vehicle accidents increased up by 12.5%. And 21.6% of all traffic crash fatalities were related to speeding. So we're going to look at some of the data here. If you all can take a look on the far right-hand column, we have our 2018 data, and the North Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles, they give us a lot of good information. So you can see that the total crashes in North Carolina for 2018 was about 281,685. If you look at 2017 data, it was about 275,000 total crashes. If you look at the fatal crashes, you have 1,324 in 2018. In 2017, it was below that with about 1,287 fatal crashes. The total persons killed, you can see that on the bottom. That's 1,442 in 2018 and 1,396 in 2017. Seatbelt use in North Carolina. So the total persons killed because they weren't wearing a seatbelt in 2018 was 1,001. This is one of the only numbers that has actually decreased from 2017. In 2017, you had 1,016. If you look at the North Carolina alcohol-related crashes, so there in 2018 there was 11,345, and in 2017 almost the exact same number with 11,342. So there's 411 fatalities in 2018 compared to 368 in 2017. So North Carolina distracted driving crashes. So there in 2018. We had a total of 54,000 crashes that are due to distracted driving, and then in 2017, it was a little bit higher with 54,133. Fatalities due to distracted driving are 121 in 2018. This is another number that actually decreased because we had in 2017 we had 152 fatalities caused by distracted driving. For 2018, where speed was the #1 contributing factor for crashes, this number has increased by a lot in my mind from 2017 to 2018. We had 21,339 crashes and 17,482 crashes related to speed in 2017. So still, if you look at the number of fatalities and the number of crashes, speed is still you would think cell phones is something that is very, very, that's why everybody's crashing. Well, speed is still the #1 factor with these crashes. So this is just a summary, kind of puts it all into perspective from the 2 years. You can see that one of the only numbers that has decreased is the number of injuries from 2017 and 2018. We're about 1,500, 2,000 or so less in 2018 than we had in 2017. So if you take a look at the national data, and remember, these are all police reported incidents for the North Carolina and the national statistics. There's probably a lot more that are out there that are unknown. It might just be property damage. It could be fender benders that weren't reported. But most of the fatalities on these are right on. So if you look at in 2017, there were 34,247 fatal crashes This number is a little bit less than the 2016 number, but if you look at the trend from 2010 all the way up to 2017, that number is increasing, even though we had about 500 or so less in 2017. If you look at the start of 2010, we're looking at 30,000 fatalities, but that number is definitely on the incline. So next we're going to discuss some defensive driving, distracted driving, cell phone use while driving, and then some keys to prevent distracted driving. So you're thinking, what is defensive driving? We've all probably heard it, but the National Safety Council defines it as driving to save lives, time, and money in spite of the conditions around you and the actions of others. So they talk about controlling the vehicle, adjusting the environment, and compensate for the incorrect actions of others. When it talks about saving lives, time, and money, the time and the money aspect can be looked at a couple different ways. So you're looking at the time spent away from work, the money that being spent on lost time injuries, replacing that employee, the insurance costs. So we're looking at all of those different factors. All right, so another way to look at defensive driving is being aware of what's going on and being able to react appropriately and timely to avoid a collision. So you want to drive defensively, but also there's a time when you want to drive offensively, so that you're making the move before it's too late. All right, what is distracted driving? Distracted driving is driving while engaged in any activity that may divert a person's attention away from the primary task of driving. So we're going to talk about several different distractions. These are manual, visual, and cognitive distractions. So the first one we're going to talk about is manual. Manual distractions are anything that requires you to take your hands off the wheel. So reaching for things inside of the vehicle, whether it's in the seat next to you, the seat behind you, the floorboard to the right of you, picking up a phone just to take a look and see what that text is. But the act of picking up your phone, that's a manual distraction. Changing your radio stations, switching songs on a music app, drinking and eating, putting on makeup, and grooming. Something that I kind of joke about in all of the older safety videos for defensive driving, they always have a guy that's shaving with an electric razor. I've never seen it happen, but I always leave that in there because you never know. I think also grooming could be brushing your hair, doing all those different things as well. All right, so visual distractions. These are anything that takes your eyes off the road while you're driving. So bad drivers. This is one of my top on this list, because when you see a bad driver, typically your eyes start following them because they're weaving in and out of traffic. They're just not paying attention, and you're looking to see what happens to them. So it's very easy to take your attention away from your driving when you're watching a bad driver. People, pedestrians, people walking along the street, people crossing in front of you, even people in other cars. Signs. Signs can be a distraction because you're either trying to read the sign, you're trying to figure out what it is. Digital billboards. This is something that is very distracting, because if you're in the sequence where you're seeing the billboard and then it starts to fade away and you're wanting to see what that new advertisement is that comes up, that's something that can be very distracting, and it takes several seconds for that new ad to come up for you to see what it's going to be. Animals. Other wrecks. This is a really big issue. One of the pet peeves of mine is being on a divided interstate and you have a wreck on the complete other side where there's a barrier up, but your traffic is still going so slow because everybody is rubbernecking, wanting to see what happened, wanting to see the emergency vehicles showing up. So other wrecks, whether it be on the other side of the road, on your side of the road, everybody's looking to see what happened. And police or other emergency vehicles. We also have looking at your cell phone. So you might have your cell phone mounted in your vent or on some sort of holder that's holding your phone up. And even though you're not holding your phone and touching your phone, just taking a look at your phone, at the songs, that who's calling you, or the email that just popped up, taking a look at that phone and taking your eyes off the road, it's considered a visual distraction. All right, so the last distraction we're going to talk about is a cognitive distractions. This is a distraction that keeps the mind from being focused while driving. And the first thing I want to talk about is the great multitasking myth. So a lot of people say that they're multitaskers, whether they're at work, whether they're at home, or driving. And actually, multitasking is truly a myth, because your mind can only do one thing at one time. The human brain is unable to perform two tasks at one time. And the way the brain works is it handles tasks in sequential order. So when your brain is switching from task to task, it's doing it rapidly. It's still taking that little bit of time to switch from thing to thing. So when the brain is flipping from subject to subject, you're missing things that's happening on the road. So you might think that you're talking on your phone, you're writing down something, you're driving, and then you're taking a drink of something, that you can do all those things at once. And you may be able to, but your mind is only thinking about one of those things at one time. And if you sit here and try to think about multiple things at one time, it's really impossible to do that. It's just that your brain is so fast that it's rapidly switching from subject to subject. All right, so with cognitive distractions, what is the risk? So the problem is drivers fail to see what's around them, even though they might be looking. They're looking out ahead, and it seems like they're paying attention, but their mind is elsewhere. And it's referred to as inattention blindness. So you're looking, but you really don't see. I don't know if anybody has ever been driving on it could be 10 miles, could be 100 miles, and you get to wherever you're going, and you don't remember anything that happened along the drive. That's probably because your mind was distracted. It was some sort of cognitive distraction, and you just show up to where you're at, and you're like, man, that was really quick. How'd I get here? You don't remember exactly how it happened because your mind was distracted. So it's also difficult to see unexpected events when you're looking but not really seeing. Your decision-making ability is inhibited by other processes, and really you're not aware that you're unaware. So you might be in the driver's seat looking at the road ahead of you, but you're really not focused on your driving. So what are some cognitive distractions? They can come in many different forms. Stress, so you've got emotional stress, family stress, relationship stress, your job stress, or financial anxiety that you may have. So all these different things they can take up a lot of room in your head when you're driving. Passengers, it might be easier for some people to drive with a passenger, but if you're in a pretty good conversation with that passenger, you're thinking about the information you're receiving from them, you're coming up with your response, and you're giving your response, and during that time, your mind is distracted away from the road. So talking on a phone, even when you're using a Bluetooth device, your hands free. That's what we want to see, is people not holding phones in their hand. But if you're in a very deep conversation, something that's pretty important, and you're having to think about that conversation, your mind is being taken away from the road. Daydreaming, that's something that probably everybody does from time to time, is you're thinking about maybe what you're doing on the weekend or what you're going to do when you get home from work, and it's taking part of your mind away from the task at hand, which should be driving. All right, so I want to give you all some information on cell phone use while driving. So texting diverts a driver's eye for an average of 4.6 seconds, equivalent of driving the length of a football field at 55 miles an hour blindfolded. So when you send that one text, it typically is going to take between about 4.6 seconds. The time that this takes is the size of a football field. And even though you may be just doing it real quick and you look right up, it just takes that one split second for somebody to slam on their brakes in front of you, or for somebody to merge into oncoming traffic. So you want to be aware of that, how long that text is taking. with the old phones, the Nokia phones and Blackberries that had buttons, it was probably easier for people to text because they could feel those buttons. But with iPhones and smooth glass screen phones now, it's very easy to make mistakes. Also, if you have a program where you're speaking to text, your attention is being taken away from driving because you're having to press the button for it to listen. You're talking into text, and typically, depending on the importance of the text, you want to make sure what you're sending, it hasn't auto-corrected into something that maybe shouldn't go out, but your eyes are going to be taken away from the road for about 4.6 seconds when you do send a text. So friends don't let friends drive distracted. With teens, 78% of teen drivers say they're likely not to text and drive if friends tell them that it's wrong. 44% of drivers say that they would be thankful if a passenger complained about their texting while driving, and 90% say they'd stop if a friend in the car asked them to. So if you are a passenger in a car and you feel uncomfortable that somebody is texting or doing something on their phone that is taking their attention away from the road, it's okay to speak up, because you need to be concerned with your safety as well as their safety. And 90% of the time, if you're with a friend, they'll probably stop texting if you ask them to do so. All right, so 10 things people do on their phones while driving. So 61% admit to texting, 33% admit to emailing. We have about 28% that are just web browsing. That could be shopping. 27% of people admit to using Facebook, taking selfies or photos. 17% of people looking at Twitter and Instagram. 14% of people actually taking a video. We've got 12% of people admitting to that. And then Snapchat and video chatting, you have 11 to 10%. So these are the top things that people are doing while on their phone when they're driving. So it's not just the texting, it's answering, responding, reading emails. You might get a text alert that a deal's coming up at one of your favorite stores, and so you go to it and try to find something on sale that you're looking for. So all these are the top things that people are doing on their cell phones while driving. ZenDrive did a very interesting study, and they did a 3-month analysis of 3 million anonymous drivers who made 570 million trips and covered 5.6 billion miles. What they found was motorists with smartphones use handheld devices in 88 out of every 100 trips. ZenDrive estimates there are about 600 million trips involving distracted driving in the U.S. each day. I think this is something that's totally believable, because I do with my job. I drive all over the place, and I see all kinds of people on their phones. And typically, it's easy to tell when somebody's on their phone. And if you have a suspicion of it and you go to pass them, more times than not, they're either texting or they're holding their phone talking on it. So how do you spot a distracted driver? So some of the common signs are changing speeds. This is the biggest one that I see. Somebody that's not maintaining their speed, they're slowing and accelerating for no reason. And what I see on an interstate is when you go to pass this person, they notice you coming up behind them, and then they'll speed up to maintain 70-mile-an-hour speed limit. So when you go to pass them, they speed up, but then once you back off, then they start that deceleration, accelerating, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. Swerving and veering off the road. From my experience, what I see a lot is somebody that starts veering off the road. They look up and notice, and then they jerk back onto the in between their lines. When you see people that are reaching for items, they may have kids in the back seat, they've dropped something, and you can see somebody that's reaching, and a lot of times they completely take their eyes off the road. They have one or two hands reaching for something, and that's something that's very obvious to see. When you see somebody that's braking erratically, or they're braking when they're going up an incline. So also you can see people that are holding their phone, and a lot of times people will try to stick their phone on top of their steering wheel so that they still have their eye on the road, but they're also looking at their phone, and you can usually see that when you're driving behind somebody. Also, when you see somebody that's rolling through a stop, they're probably distracted. And when you have somebody that's sitting at a green light, when it was red and then it turns green, might be 4 or 5 seconds before they realize that it's turned green, and then they speed off. It's good to pause for 2 to 3 seconds once a light turns green to make sure that nobody is coming from either direction. But when somebody is sitting at a stoplight for 5, it could be in 6 seconds because they're texting, that could be something very irritating to people in the traffic line. All right, so a couple things on how to prevent distracted driving. You want to make sure that you plan ahead. You want to adjust your seat, adjust the mirrors, and you want to adjust the steering wheel before you begin your trip. You don't want to get onto the main road and notice that your mirrors are out of adjustment while you're driving. You want to make sure you're doing that before you start your trip. Complete your calls, texts, and emails prior to moving your vehicle. You want to also program any GPS directions before you start your trip, whether it's in your built-in GPS in your car. A lot of them will not allow you to enter in addresses once you're driving, so make sure you're doing those things before you start. Finishing your meals, putting on makeup and grooming before you drive. Something that I see a lot is when a rear view mirror is tilted straight up and down. Usually you'll pull up beside somebody that has that when you see it from behind, and they're putting on their makeup or they're fixing their hair. So make sure you're doing those things before you get on the road. And you really have to resist the temptation to text or Google search for something before you arrive at your destination. You might be getting blown up with text on your phone. And it's really hard to resist the temptation to take a look at it and even respond. But if you can start changing that behavior, it'll become easier and easier. And also, you want to secure items that may roll around, or things that, if you have a drink, you want to put in the cup holder that's closest to you so that you're not tempted to reach across the seat or reach into the back seat to get those things while you're driving. All right, so to wrap it up, automobile crashes and fatalities are on the rise in North Carolina. There were 6,618 more crashes from 2017 up to 2018. Distractions are everywhere when driving. There's never been more distractions in your vehicle, whether it's the cell phone is the big one. It could be kids in your car. It could be other drivers. All the different distractions we talked about, they're everywhere. And you really have to stay focused when you're driving. The mind needs to be completely focused when you're driving. Try to clear your mind and not think about all the stresses of daily life when you're driving, even though that's very, very hard to say. But when you're thinking about those things, your mind is being taken away from the road. And so no matter how much you're tempted, text, calls, and emails can wait until you've arrived at your destination. And try to develop a pre-trip routine to ensure you're driving without those distractions, planning ahead, making sure that you have things where you need them in your vehicle. And so my name is Michael Williams, and I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody and see if we have any questions. So I think everybody's unmuted. Do we have any questions today?
Hey, Michael, Steve Billings.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, buddy. Was just wondering your thoughts around Bluetooth and hands-free devices. I know that we've discussed the cell phone use and just the amount of distraction that causes. So just wanted to see your thoughts around hands-free.
So it is, in most states, it is the law for commercial motor vehicles they have to have a hands-free device. And there are some companies that they need to receive a call from the office. And I still think that, it's good to have those things even in your personal car, but it's still a best practice if you get a call, even though you have Bluetooth, you want to try to pull off to a safe area, pull off an exit and park, and then call that person back or continue on the call if you had to answer it, because with a lot of our companies, they all have Bluetooth built-in, or headsets built into the cabs of their trucks. So I think it is a good thing. But if you're using it as a way to pass time, to make personal calls, non-necessary calls going down the road, it's definitely a big distraction. But we do understand that there are situations where people need to receive a call to figure out where they're going, to figure out the delivery times and things like that. Thanks, Steve. Do we have any other questions? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody being here today, and this presentation will go out to your producer. If you are interested in it, you can shoot them a message and get access to it. And we look forward to seeing you guys next Tuesday at 11 o'clock. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, guys.